we go. It unmuted itself. Computers are weird. Welcome in, everybody. My name is Jesse, and welcome to another exciting episode of Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. Welcome back from March break to all our students who were just taking a break not too long ago. This is like our 5th program back since we started after the break, and it is so nice to dive back in as we continue our mission of showcasing the amazing world of science, nature, conservation, and exploration with all of you. Teachers live and virtually, we've just unveiled our daily dives. If you want to head to our YouTube channel, check out the playlist for that. We've got some really exciting stuff on the go there. But of course, you guys are all here today because we are joined by one of our all-time favorite partners, the Toronto Zoo. Over the last 2 years on that YouTube channel, you can check out the over 40 broadcasts we've done with them, highlighting their incredible conservation efforts, showcasing the wide and wonderful world of wildlife. We've been to every pavilion, we've been to every enclosure, we've seen some of the most incredible animals on this planet, and I really encourage you to check that out. There's so much to explore and discover. Now today, as spring beckons, the first day of spring was not too long ago, we're going to learn about being in the air, how we keep species alive, how we save species through some of the amazing reproductive work that they do at the Toronto Zoo. Now originally we pitched this as Cheetahs Extraordinaire. We had a bit of a change of plans today. We're going to feature some cheetah stuff. We're going to feature some red panda stuff. We're dodging some weather. We're going to have a great time no matter what we explore and discover together. And I'm so excited for all of your questions at the end. Now, without further ado, I'm going to welcome in Mary Ellen, one of our 2 educator awesome team today. We're going to be hopping back between 2 incredible folks at the zoo to kick us off and dive in with our broadcast. Mary Ellen, nice to see you again and welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be joining us here again in one of our amazing broadcasts. So nice to be back after March break. The zoo was very busy. We had lots of guests here on site. Unfortunately, you might be able to tell today by our cloudy skies, but we've had some freezing rain here in Toronto this morning, which makes it a little bit interesting. Some of our animals, they're not too fond of the freezing rain. I can't blame them. I don't know about you at home, but I'm definitely not a huge fan of it myself. So we're going to work with that today and make sure we still have an absolutely amazing program for you. Now, today, we're actually going to start off in our reproductive labs with my fellow friend and coworker here, Morgan. But before we do, Jesse's going to bring up our land acknowledgement here for us today, just to quickly say that with everyone today. So we would like to acknowledge that the land that we are standing on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse nations, Inuit and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Williams Treaty signed with multiple Mississauga and Chippewa bands. Thank you so much, Jesse. I'm going to hand it over to Morgan, and then you're going to come back and see me and maybe a few of my 4-legged friends here as well. I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. I'm very lucky. I get to be inside, dry, in a warm area. Now, it might sound a little echoey. It's because I'm in one of the many reproductive rooms that we have here at the zoo. So this is for the reproductive sciences. Now, you may think, and everyone else may think, reproduction is just when a baby animal is made. Well, it gets a lot more detailed than that, because when an animal has a baby, that's usually when we're actually not needed to intervene. The scientists that we have here in the reproduction lab is usually when an animal needs a little bit more help to have a baby, or when we're trying to save those really precious cells in order to help conservation. So the one room that I'm in right now, and the reason I'm starting in this room, it might look a little plain, but this room actually holds the most amount of animals in the zoo. I know that sounds really weird because there isn't a single animal near me, but let me flip my camera around here and show you. Sorry, it's not as easy as just pushing a button. There we go. So these containers here actually hold a bunch of cells that can be used to make a baby. So in a perfect world, 2 animals would meet, they would really like each other, and they would be able to make a really happy, healthy baby. Now that's not always the case. Sometimes the reproductive sciences team needs to intervene and collect some of their cells in order to help them out. So I'm gonna flip it back to me here so I can chat. There we go. So sometimes we need to go in and collect some of those cells that help an animal make a baby. Now there's lots of really good ways to do this, and there's lots of benefits from doing this. So a female will have an egg and a male will have a sperm. Now sometimes if animals are too far across the world to meet each other, we can actually just collect those cells and create a really valuable baby just without having to transfer an animal at all. This is also really helpful if two animals maybe had some babies in the past and then they had to transfer back to their other zoos. We can actually collect their cells and save them in all of these awesome tanks here, and then they can make babies in the future. So to go into a little bit more detail, we've got these straws. So these straws are what is housed in these containers here. So this straw, and the reason that I say there's the most animals in the zoo in this room, is because this straw can contain over 1 million cells. So that could mean over 1 million babies can be made with just one straw here. So that's pretty cool. Another thing that our science team can do is we actually don't need a mom animal involved to make a baby always. We can take the cell from a male and take a cell from a female, and we could actually grow a baby in a little petri dish in our lab here, and then we can use that cell, put it inside of a female, and make a whole other animal. So lots of cool things in this room, and the reason that we can do all of this, or that we want to do all of this, is in order to increase genetic diversity. So the more animals that we are able to make from different parents, the more genetic diversity, so all of the different traits that your whole classroom has, think of all of those different traits. That's really great to keep populations going. So the more different traits that we save in these tanks, the more likely it is that we can expand the populations out. So I'm gonna take you on a little tour down the hallway with me as we go into our next lab. So while we go into our next lab, I'm gonna walk and talk a little bit. Our one lab, as I just explained, focuses a lot on those cells that make babies. So the next lab that I'm going to talk about focuses on our hormones. So we may not all be aware, thank you. You'll see some of the team working behind me. That's just because it's a busy lab at all times. So what are hormones? Hormones, we all have them inside of us. So just like we have different vitamins to make us stronger, or we've got blood inside of us to make us healthy, hormones can kind of be like that. We all have different hormones in our body that make us who we are. Hormones are also really important at telling everyone in the lab what's going on inside of your body. So the really cool thing about this lab is we can take samples from animals and use those to learn all about their hormones. So this room's a little bit cooler. It's a little bit larger. I'm going to turn the camera around and talk a little bit more about the different hormones that we can do. So all of these really cool lab equipment here, see lots of things shaking around. This is all in order to study those hormones. So first of all, you may be asking, what kind of samples do we take from animals? Well, we start off with what is simplest to get from an animal? Their poop. I know everyone thinks that's really gross, but it's much easier to go into an enclosure, take a poop sample from a tiger that's already had their poop for the day, the keepers are just cleaning it up, than it is to ask them for a blood sample. I'm sure, as you can imagine, it's not always the easiest thing to take blood from a tiger. But what do tigers or cheetahs or pandas or all animals naturally give us? Their poop. So we can take that poop, we break it down with a bunch of different chemicals, and then we can put it into one of these plates. So one of these plates will contain hormones from a bunch of different samples, and then some cool things happen to it, lots of different lab techniques that I won't bore anyone with, and it goes into this machine here. This machine does all sorts of really cool science and measuring and all that stuff, and it will put it onto a chart. So I'm going to bring you over to a chart that I have as an example here, which is our cheetahs. So as we can see, when the animal was not breeding, there was no hormones going on. We looked at their fecal samples, so those poop samples that I was talking about, the hormone levels were low. Then, when breeding happened, all of the hormones went crazy. All of these hormones that tell us that the baby is growing inside of the mom all started to rise, and then they fell down again. So this is just one good way to tell if an animal is pregnant without actually having to do anything with that animal. Kind of the same, I'm gonna flip you back here. Kind of the same thing as how it's a little bit tough to get blood samples from animals that don't always want to be touched. It's the same thing as telling if an animal is pregnant. It's really hard to do. For humans, you see their bellies grow, you have ultrasounds, different tests with doctors. We don't really have that with animals. So we need to be able to tell that they're pregnant in order to help them help them make the baby grow, give them the proper nutrition, all those fun things. But again, we can't always do that with our hands. So yet again, it's easy to take their sample, their fecal sample or their poop sample from the enclosure, bring it into this lab, do all the fancy work with it, and then bring out their hormones and tell us if they're pregnant or not. So there's so much more to talk about in this lab, but I will end up flipping it over back to Mary Ellen now to talk about one specific animal, the cheetah, and our breeding that we have recently done with one of our cheetahs. So you got to see a chart of their hormones. Now, Mary Ellen will tell you a little bit more about how those babies actually came to be.
Yes, thank you so much, Morgan. We absolutely love our reproductive labs here at the Toronto Zoo. So what I'm going to do today now is we were going to be live with our cheetahs, but we had some weather constraints today. But I wanted to make sure we still spoke about them because they are such an amazing animal. So I've put together some clips here that Jesse's going to play for us. So we still get to see our cheetahs and learn all about them. So these are just a compilation of clips that I have of our cheetahs from probably the last 2 years or so. This one in particular was from back in actually 2015 or 2016 when I first started here at the zoo. But we're just going to roll through some of our clips. Now, Morgan was saying they're really important for their breeding and we track their breeding. But how do we pick which animal we're going to look at? And, why do we care about specific ones over others? Now, there's a lot of species here at the zoo that are endangered. So it means they're not doing super well in the wild. And they are usually a part of something called an SSP. Now, I know we've talked about that a little bit here on some of our broadcasts in the past, but that is a species survival plan. And I like to think of it more like a dating app for animals. And what we're doing is we are taking a look at those genetics in those labs that Morgan is in and looking to see who their best match would be. And this is really important for cheetahs. They are known to be very bad at breeding on their own. Now, it's not really their fault. We're not blaming the cheetahs. But a long time ago, back in our history, they went through something called a bottleneck. And everyone, if you think of like a drink bottle, maybe like a bottle of Coke or Pepsi or anything that you're drinking out of, if you flip it upside down, not with liquid in it, it goes from being really big to really small quite quickly. And that's what happened to cheetahs. They went from being a very large, successful, healthy population, and they went through they got too healthy, too big, and they expanded their range too far. And they isolated themselves from each other, and that caused a big decline or lowering in their population numbers. And because of this, we see that a lot of cheetahs today, there we go, I love that funny face in that one, are actually very closely related to each other, which is not genetically healthy for them. We don't want them to be mating with someone who's their close cousin or sibling or parent. We want them to have diverse populations because that diversity makes them stronger with their population and helps them to survive. So we look at our cheetahs here at the zoo and compare them to ones all over the world in other accredited facilities, and we find a match. And just last year, we were looking for our female Amara. Now, Amara was actually born here at the zoo a few years ago, and she came of age to start breeding. And we were lucky. We didn't find one, but 2 successful matches for her SSP. So their names were Clark and David, or Clark 2 officially, because I believe his father was also named Clark. And we were actually able to transport Clark and David to the Toronto Zoo, and they got to do something called a howdy. And a howdy sounds very much like a Western or like a cowboy move with the hat, but it's not quite that. Essentially, what we were doing is we were introducing the cheetahs to each other with protected contact. When you're meeting someone from the first time, it can be a little scary. You don't know who they are, and you might want to keep some space between you and them. And cheetahs and other animals, they will show their body language to tell us how they're feeling. They might make some vocalizations, they might cry or chirp, they might puff up to look really big if they want to be defensive, and they might even scratch or bite each other. So we use a howdy as a first form of contact. And essentially what that means is Amara got to meet Clark and David individually through a fence. And she did like both of them. You know, she was pretty okay with them both. But Clark won out. And so he was the preferred match. And he and Amara actually were successful in mating. We were able to track her hormones, which was really exciting. And they produced 3 beautiful, healthy offspring named Marie, Toulouse, and Berlioz. And they are living here at the Toronto Zoo, and they just turned 1 in January. So we're very excited to have these 3 healthy, happy cubs here with us. And they are a super important aspect in cheetah conservation, giving off for the next generation. Now, everyone's always so sad. They go, what about David? He tried, doesn't he get to have a family and have some offspring? But him and Clark are actually brothers. They're litter mates. So we don't need his genetics right now represented in the population. So like Morgan was saying, in the first room that she was in at the zoo, David is actually in that room. You were just with him a few moments ago. So we were able to collect his samples and store them in that room, in one of the straws that Morgan was showing you. And that means that years from now, even after David potentially has passed away years in the future, we will be able to use his cells to help create the next generation of cheetahs, which is absolutely incredible science to see. And we're able to use that and help their population, because David, way in the future, is going to be a very unique animal, and his genetics will not be represented anywhere else. So that's a pretty cool way that we're able to help out our cheetahs here at the zoo. And they're just one of many species that we have these SSPs or dating apps for. And for this one specifically, just because they have so much issue breeding, we were very lucky to have those 2 options for Amara in order to find her successful pair and raise those healthy, beautiful cubs that we now have here at the zoo. And they're actually close to this size here now. They grow very quickly as babies. They need to grow fast and strong really fast. And so they're actually almost full grown. So if you come to the zoo in the summertime to see them, it might be a little bit difficult to tell them all apart. But a good way to look is if you see one running around with lots of energy, that's most likely one of the younger or baby ones. They tend to be a little bit more active than some of the adults do. All right, I'm going to pass it back to Morgan now here, and we're going to learn a little bit more specifically about some of the ways that we can help with the pregnancies and all of the other information and behind the scenes that goes into it before we meet up with another furry friend of ours.
Hello again. Thank you. And thank you, Mary Ellen, for tying it back. That is an exact example of how awesome it is to have the technology and the science behind freezing those samples. Now, David's genes will be long used, and his awesome genetics will be shown again sometime in the future. A little quick story here. We actually had bison samples frozen for over 40 years. Now that sample was then brought out 35 to 40 years later and created a baby. So those genes and all of the things that were involved in that baby would have died maybe 40 years ago and would have never been brought back to the surface. So now it's so exciting. We can bring it back many years later and just keep increasing the populations. So I brought you down to one of our other labs while Mary Ellen was talking, and I hustled down over because we're very lucky to have some of these samples that we use actually being processed right now. So warning, if you don't like poop, well, then the reproductive lab might not be for you. So here on this table is actually some caribou fecal samples. Now, these were sent to us from a partnership that we have with Parks Canada. So these samples were all the way from the Rocky Mountains, and we can actually use these samples to tell if a caribou was pregnant or not. So even though it just looks like a bag of fecal samples right now, we'll run this through the process that I was showing you upstairs, and it will tell us the level of hormone that is within the sample. And then we will be able to see if it's at the level of a pregnant animal or not. So I was really lucky that our lab was doing those right now. So Jessie, I'm going to ask you to pull up the red panda video that I have, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we help some of the more difficult species. So hopefully, there you go. So this is our red panda Paprika. We were very lucky that she was showing signs of pregnancy, but red pandas are really hard to tell with their hormones. So we actually had to go through that ultrasound. Like I was talking about, it's easier to ultrasound a panda than a tiger. Let's look at this video here. There is the baby heartbeat. So we were able to get that from the ultrasound. I know it's a quick video. We might have to show it again at the end just so you can see it again. Or maybe, Jessie, do you want to rewind a little bit? Perfect. So again, our vet was able to spray some water on our red panda's belly, use the ultrasound to search for any signs of a baby there. As you can see, she's getting her snacks while she's getting the ultrasound. And then soon we'll see the baby on the ultrasound image. So look really closely there. You should see a little movement. I know it's very hard to tell. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So this is a very good example where hormones might not always tell us the full story, and we need to use further technology. So red pandas, just like cheetahs, give us a lot of trouble when it comes to making babies, telling that they're pregnant, and then keeping their babies. So red pandas actually don't show very much pregnancy as far as expanding their bellies. They also don't show it in their hormones, which is really, really tough. Just when you think we have it all figured out, we'll use their stool samples or poop basically to tell if they're pregnant. Red pandas found a way around it, and it is too hard to tell with their hormone levels if they're pregnant or not. So luckily for us, they are kind enough and small enough that we can train them with some treats and use an ultrasound video. So like you saw there, we had Paprika stand up on her own, got some snacks, and she offered up her belly so we could ultrasound her. And luckily we were able to find that really awesome heartbeat. So that was really exciting for us. Now, the other trick with red pandas is there's only a very short period that you can actually see that heartbeat. So we were ultrasounding Paprika once a week for 3 months before finding that heartbeat. And the reason for this is red pandas will actually have their cells meet. So the cell from the male and the cell from the female will meet. They will create a baby and actually hit pause. So that cell, that happy egg that's going to be a baby, actually just pauses in space for a little bit. I know that sounds crazy. It will pause within the mom's belly. It won't grow. It won't have any other processes with it. And this is actually so then the mom can take that time to use all of her resources. So she'll scrounge for enough food. She'll get really nice and heavy. She'll make sure she makes a really nice den that she's protected. And then she can kind of hit play without knowing it in her body or in her mind. Her body will hit play and then it'll make the baby. So we have no way of knowing that through hormones. So we just ultrasounded her once a week. She got tons and tons of treats. And then one day we finally saw that heartbeat. And as you can imagine, everyone in the repro side was so excited about that. So that is my red panda story. It's one of my favorites, and we wrote a big scientific paper on it. So we're really excited about that. And we learned a ton, which can then help red pandas in the future. So Mary Ellen, I'm not sure if there's any luck to look at that. All right, that's what you guys really want to see.
All right. Thank you so much, Morgan. So we actually have the star of that video with us here today. This is Paprika, everyone. So just like I thought, because of the not so nice weather this morning, our red pandas have found themselves inside. So we do have 2 red pandas here at the Toronto Zoo right now. We have Paprika, and then in the other exhibit, we have Sulva as well. But we're going to be focusing on our star of the show here. And we're going to see if she's going to maybe come down to see us and let us get a close look at her. So as Morgan was saying, they have a really interesting way of how they can get pregnant. But what's even more interesting is their courtship in the wild. So red pandas are mostly a solitary animal. Now, if you've been following our videos before, you're going to know we talk a lot about solitary versus social. Now, a solitary animal is one who likes to live alone. So think more of the opposite of humans. Now, red pandas are known to be solitary, but they can travel in some small groupings. Particularly, moms and their babies will hang out for a little while together and move around as a family unit. But what this means is they have ranges and territories that they protect and they guard. So specifically, females will have a slightly smaller range and they'll kind of be in the middle of a habitat. And then the males have larger ranges around and outside them, and they patrol. And they do this to try and scare away other males. They want to say, hey, this is my area. I want to be the one to mate with those females. This is my space here, and I don't need you to come over and bother me. So they will work really hard to keep their area. Now, one way they can do this is, I don't know if you can see, but there we go. We got our keeper friend in the background. They've got some awfully big claws. And so they got some sharp claws there. Well, they will use to scratch up lots of trees, and they will mark their area and say, this is mine. Now, another thing they'll also do is they will use urine and scent marking, which maybe isn't the most yummy thing to think about, but it's a really effective way for animals to communicate without being there. Humans, we're a very vocal species. So we like to talk to express our thoughts and feelings, and we'll talk to each other, and we'll use different sounds and communicate through different languages. Animals don't always have that luxury. It can be a really big space that they're occupying, and a small call from one red panda to the next might not be heard. So their better way to communicate is through scent. So they're going to leave scent markings all around that can tell other red pandas things about them. It can say, hey, get off my land. This is where I live. Or the females can start saying, hey, I'm ready to have a baby. Come find me. And so that's what the males will do, is they'll go and look for females. And because of where they live and the different weather that they can have, they don't always actually smell those samples around them, but they can actually absorb them through their feet, and they almost taste the different markings around them, which is kind of cool. I don't know, we wear shoes everywhere we go, but if you could imagine walking around barefoot and being able to taste the ground underneath of you, that's kind of like what they do with their pores, which honestly seems like a very effective way to communicate. Now, red pandas, after they meet up, they will mate. And then, as Morgan was saying, it doesn't always mean it's a successful pregnancy or baby right away, but something that they can do is, if it is a successful one, the mom will be pregnant, and then the father or the male will leave. So it's the females raising the offspring. And once they do, or once they give birth, they'll have their offspring with them for a little while before they're ready to go off on their own. So Paprika, her baby Adira, the baby that we had, the previous red panda, Adira, she actually just left the zoo a little while ago and is starting her own life adventure on her own. And we're very excited to see where she ends up and if she's able to find a successful mate as well. All right, Paprika here is telling us that she wants to go and explore other areas. So what we're going to do, Jesse, is we're going to take the time to throw it to questions first. And we're going to see if we can find Sulva and keep the questions going with a panda.
Unbelievable. That was like, even this, decisions. Should I stay or should I go? We're unsure.
She's trying to figure out.
What a glorious animal up close. I've never seen a red panda that close ever in any context in my life. That is spectacular. Thank you so much for that. So Morgan's on hand too. We'll be able to go between both Morgan and Mary Ellen for questions as we keep the eye on our red panda friend.
So Morgan's actually joined me here, and she's with me live now. So she might leave the call, so we're together now.
Perfect. It's even better. And then folks, YouTubers, if you guys want to share questions in the chat, please do. This is wild. Look at that. Unbelievable. And then live classes, I'm going to be coming to you. Stony Plain Central. I'm going to come to Miss Smith's class first. If you guys want to kick us off with a question, you are in the broadcast. And welcome in, guys. Hi.
Why do red pandas and raccoons look the same?
Ooh, good question.
That's a great question. So why do they look the same? And you're right. The red panda kind of just looks like a red version of a raccoon. So in history, there is potentially some relation for them way, way back in their lineage line. But we see that animals have a lot of the same looks and characteristics and adaptations based on what they like to do. Now, let's think of a raccoon versus a red panda. Well, they like to live in trees. Check. They like to eat fruits and veggies and snack on pretty much anything they can get a hold of. These guys really like bamboo as well. Check. They're living up in the trees. They're not much of a jumper between the branches. They can jump a little bit, but not the way a squirrel can. And so because of all these similarities of where they like to live and their habitats are pretty similar, they can withstand different types of temperature and weather together. That's why we see them looking so similar. So they have those nice big claws to help them climb, a big fluffy tail to help them if it gets cold, or if they need balance while walking on the branches. And then they've got their nose, eyes, and mouth, and their whiskers to help them navigate their world, and those nice big ears to help them hear everything around them. So if we look at animals who look similarly together, it's because they usually live in a very similar habitat, or they do the same sort of activities. And so those traits or characteristics are just linked to how they live their life.
Fantastic. I'm just like so professional detachment so far out the window with a red panda this close to the camera. Can hardly tell you. Fantastic, guys. Great first question. Miss Green's class, please do unmute your mic as well. We'll be able to come to you guys in a second. But Miss Tarvin, we'll head to Illinois for a minute. If you want to come on in, you're good to go. Hey, guys.
You want to ask? You can get up and ask.
Hey.
I think our sound's on. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, you're good. Yep.
She's not going to get up.
We asked,
Okay,
how
Ella, you
long
ask.
are they pregnant?
Say, how long are they pregnant?
Yeah.
How long are they pregnant?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so how long are they pregnant? So I'm going to have Morgan give us this one here.
Hello, I'm good. So it can actually differ. Do you remember how I was saying red pandas can hit a little bit of a pause button when they're growing their baby? So they can hit that pause button for about 2 months. So they are technically pregnant at that moment, but the baby isn't growing. So it kind of differs. It can range anywhere from 2 to 5 months. But in the point that the baby is actually growing is usually only about 3 months. So it's a really quick, short pregnancy.
Interesting. Thanks, Morgan. Miss Benoit's class, we'll head to Cordis. Come on in, guys, and take us away. Hey.
When the babies are born, are the full red?
Ooh,
Oh, so are they fully red when they're born? That's a great question, and they're not. So good observation. So yeah, Paprika here has some pretty distinct markings of red, black, and white. When they're born, they're actually more of like, see on her forehead, she's kind of got like a tan color. They're more of that shape or that color, all over. And then as they start to get older, their colors come in very bold and striking.
And they don't have the stripes when they're born.
Oh, and
tail.
they don't have their stripes on their tail either. So their tail is just one uniformed color.
And thank you, mystery third person, for helping with that answer too. Hey! We're going to head to Scarborough, Miss Green's class. If you guys want to unmute, you're good to go. Share away. Hi, guys.
Go ahead.
How much?
You wanted to know how much food they eat in a day.
Yeah, how much food do they eat in a day?
Yeah.
Ooh, good question. So they eat a lot of bamboo, and we do have one of their keepers here with us. So I know they're eating lots of snacks and fruit and veggies. And I know that when they're pregnant, they have to eat 3 times as much bamboo as they normally would. But how much do we give our red pandas on average?
So they get, it's called a leaf eater biscuit. So it's basically like dog food, but for a red panda. And it has all the nutrients that they need. So each panda right now is getting 400 grams a day. So that's kind of like 2 bowls of cereal size. And that does change throughout the year depending on their weight and how big their appetite is or how little their appetite is. And then bamboo, they usually get, I don't know weight wise, but I would say like about a decent bundle about that thick. And the bamboo we get is about that tall. So they get to feed on that all day long. And again, they can be really picky. So sometimes they'll love their bamboo and they eat all of it. Other times they hardly touch any of it. So we do keep track of that so that we can monitor their intake of their food.
Outstanding. Thanks, man. All right. By the way, I want to note, Gasha on YouTube has agreed that this is the cutest thing ever. And I think no one's arguing that point at this point. This is pretty spectacular. But Busy Moo's class joining us in Vancouver wanted to know, is paprika domesticated? And you can sort of highlight what that term means from the zoo angle.
Yeah.
Would we describe it that way or not?
No, we definitely do not. The only animals that we have here in the zoo that are like domesticated animals is we do have domesticated goats, and our Bactrian camels as well are domesticated camels. And domesticated, think of it more in a simple term of like an animal that you'd have in your house as a pet, or an animal that's like on a farm, like a cow or a horse, things like that. Those are animals that have been bred and are used for more human reasons. We like to think of all of our animals here at the zoo as still being wild animals, even though you've been seeing that our keeper has been feeding our red panda here. I am trying to keep a safe distance. Every time Paprika does get near me, I am backing up a little bit. I'm not allowing her to come and touch me. I always like to say that any animal with a mouth can bite, and she does have those razor sharp claws as well. So we do have to be very careful. Although red pandas are more, I'd say maybe one of the more friendlier of the animals we have here at the zoo, we still have to respect that they are a true wild animal, and I am in her space right now. So as soon as she said that she wanted to go, we opened up her door to give her that opportunity because she is still very much a wild animal.
Fantastic. I'm really glad we get that clarification because I think a lot of people see animals close up like this in the zoo context. It can seem like they're touchable, huggable, all these things. And I really like when we take the opportunity to highlight it's not quite the case. And you'll find that generally with fantastic animal care and education organizations like the Toronto Zoo is that they're not hugging things, they're not grabbing things, they're not posing with a panda on a shoulder. All those behaviors and practices are actually quite unfortunate, not the best for animals. And so what you can look for zoo and aquaria around the world is something called AZA or CAZA accreditation. And that means they're going to be at this really high standard of animal care where they're taking care of them, but they're not crossing that line into something where sort of exploits them.
Exactly. We're going to do a panda swap here while we're doing this question.
Panda swap.
Yeah.
I'm going to head back to Stony Plain Central. We'll do one more round of questions, folks. Come on back in Alberta. Hey, Miss Smith. Hi.
Are wild red pandas dangerous?
Yeah.
Good question. So are the wild ones dangerous? Now, we like to consider that wild animals, ideally, they have a healthy fear of people. So we don't want wild animals approaching us. These animals here are very used to people being around them. And so it makes them more comfortable with us. And a wild animal can be very unpredictable. So I always recommend that we avoid wild animals and we appreciate them from a distance because any interaction with them can be dangerous for us, but also for them. If they meet you and you're really nice, they might think that all people are really nice. And unfortunately, that's not always the case in some areas. And if they think that all humans are nice, maybe the next one they approach won't be so friendly. And so that could put them in danger. So wild ones, they may not be aggressive to us, but we still want to avoid them.
Fantastic. I'm really glad, again, we get the nuance in this with every animal or organization. So thank you for that, Mary Ellen. I'm going to skip ahead just to one other class. I will come to Miss Tarvin and Miss Green's class, but Miss Benoit's class is a student waiting in the camera for so long. So Miss Benoit's group, welcome in, man. Thanks for being so patient. Go for it. Hi.
Why do males leave the females when the baby is born?
Interesting. Yeah.
Oh, good question. Yeah. So there's a lot of species out there that do this. So because they are what's called a solitary species, they don't really like to spend a ton of time with each other. And so there's a lot of animals out there. Cheetahs do the same thing. Pygmy hippos do it as well. There's so many animals out there that once they've interacted for breeding and mating, that's kind of all they instinctually know how to do. That's kind of, they've checked off their little to-do box and they're good to go on to the next thing. So red pandas are similar. Once they interact, they do get tired of each other pretty quickly. And so once they're done breeding, they say, see you later, I'll catch up with you next year. And so they prefer to be solitary and alone. And if they raise the babies together, it means that they would be interacting for a very long time together.
Yeah, as you said, a lot, if not most animals do that. Most animals, they mate and that's it, and there's no parental care jointly after that. A lot of the apes people are quite unique in that regard, and so it's always a good question. Miss Tarvin's class, I'm coming to you, and then I will head back to Miss Benoit for a sec, because you got this whole lineup going on. But we will wrap up after 2 more questions, folks. So Miss Tarvin, come on in, guys, and unmute your mic for us. Here we go. Run.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi.
Go.
Where do the animals live in the wild?
Yeah, where
do they live in the wild? Yeah, good question. So these guys are found right now in our Eurasia section of the zoo. So they are from different parts of all over Asia, I believe. Nepal, China, yeah.
So you get to go see the Himalayas and find red pandas at the same time. Sounds like a great vacation for the future. Miss Benoit class, we're coming to you one more time. I will note again for all our YouTube friends, I know some of our classes have had to go. TorontoZoo.com if you want to learn more about the amazing conservation work they do there. And if you want to check out this program, share it with your friends, or any of the other amazing stuff we've done with the zoo, head to our YouTube channel. There's so much to discover right there, and a lot of new things we have on the go as well. Miss Benoit, Cordes, if you want to wrap us up with one final question, you're good to go, grade 3s.
How long do red pandas live for?
Yeah, good question.
Good question. So that can be a range for them. On average, we see that they can live about 7 years in the wild, and they can make it to being up to 12 years in captivity or around that range. There's always a few outliers in there for sure. But for this species, being in captivity, they do have more access to food and medical care. Not every species does better in captivity, but red pandas are one that we do see can extend their length of life by being in a zoo setting, by having access to the food that we were talking about earlier. And also with the reproductive science team that we have here, we're able to monitor them, make sure that they're healthy and happy. And if they get sick, we're able to treat them right away.
Outstanding. Mary Ellen, Morgan, our entire zoo team, thank you so much for such a fun program as always, and the most incredible close-up animal interaction of all time. Is there any final message you want to share with our kids before we bring in our classes to say a big thank you and farewell? Good luck with the camera first.
Yes, I'm just going to turn our camera around here for us as we back out, just to say goodbye to everyone with our faces showing as well, without letting a red panda go.
That's right. Don't let but no panda escapes today. That would be a terrible end to the program.
Yes.
But yes. Last message for us.
We just want to say thank you so much for joining us here today to learn about our red pandas and our cheetahs and our reproductive science team here at the zoo. We have videos coming up with Jessie for the next few months up until the end of the school year. And I know that there's a lot of questions about these animals. So I believe it's in June, Jessie.
Yes.
In May, sorry, good.
Hey, sorry.
In May, our program is going to be all questions and answers. So start thinking now if you want to be a part of that program, and you'll be able to ask all questions to us, and we will have all of the answers about our amazing species here. We hope that you're able to come in person and meet some of them someday as well.
I am so excited. I certainly grew up with the Toronto Zoo. It's an amazing organization. I hope all our classes get the chance to head live in the not too distant future. And contrary to my thing, May, and you'll check out our newsletter. All the dates will be posted there, all that good stuff. Morgan and Mary Ellen, you two are really familiar with this, but we're going to blow some minds in a second with all our kids saying a big thank you and farewell. Stony Plain Central, Miss Tarvin, Miss Benoit's class, if you want to unmute your mic, you are all in the broadcast. Thank you so much.